Welcome to our first edition of Kingdom Conversations, brought to you by the awesome people at Hy-Vee. Time to even things up here, Matt. Mitch Holthus with you, voice of the Chiefs, along with Matt McMullen, senior team reporter. But time to get to 1-1. The rest of the league kind of worked out that if you get to 1-1, the world looks vastly different.
Yeah, it did. Obviously a bummer on Thursday night. The Chiefs wanted to win that game. That's not how they wanted to start the season, but the Buffalo Bills are starting 0-1, the Cincinnati Bengals are starting 0-1, and the LA Chargers are starting 0-1. Almost gives the Chiefs a mulligan to get back on track here on Sunday against the Jags.
And the Jags, a very familiar opponent. Chiefs faced him last year in November, faced him, of course, in the divisional playoff round here at GEHA Field at Arrowhead Stadium. And Matt, it's one of those, we called this back in November, where we saw it, where Jacksonville, behind the Titans at the time, we said there's going to be a slip and surge here. This is an emerging Jaguar team that's even better now than they were a year ago when they played the Chiefs.
Well, when we saw them in the middle of the regular season, I believe they were 3-6, and they lost to us, so they were 3-7. Well, after that, they took off, won the division, and then, of course, played the Chiefs pretty tough in that divisional round playoff game. One of the main reasons they were so good last year down the stretch, though, was quarterback Trevor Lawrence, of course, a former #1 overall pick, was just great for them in the second half of the season.
Yeah, he made history last year. He was the youngest quarterback to throw for over 4,000 yards, have 25-plus touchdown passes, and fewer than 10 interceptions, first ever. And then you talk about his second half of the season, this surge that we were predicting in November. From weeks 9 to 18, he was second in the league in completion percentage, Trevor Lawrence, and second in touchdown over INT ratio, 15/2, but the Jaguars are better. A couple of things here. One, they get Calvin Ridley off the suspension. He made a huge impact in week 1, 101 yards receiving on 8 catches. Ridley makes Christian Kirk better. Kirk had 1,100 yards last year. Makes Zay Jones better. Makes Evan Ingram better. Travis Etienne, an outstanding running back, and then they add Tank Bigsby. That's a lot of weapons on this Jaguars team, more than showed up here last year in January, losing that divisional playoff game. So for the Chiefs, everybody saw the drops last week, and this young Chiefs receiving core, and let's include everybody in the receiving core, the running backs and tight ends, but recognition will be key here. Patrick Mahomes talked about it earlier in the Hy-Vee show that I did with him earlier in the week, and that is working with Patrick. Is this man, is this zone? And Patrick's going to put the ball where it needs to be, not necessarily in your comfort zone catch radius here. If it needs to be at your back hip, it's going there, but that means catch it.
And that's the evolution of a young receiver core. We know these guys can play. They were brought here for a reason. There was those drops on Thursday night. They want to move on from that. Well, how do you move on from it? You learn from it. And the good news is those guys were in position to make plays. The offensive scheme and operation was working to put them in a position to make plays. They just have to finish it. And I'm confident that the guys will work on that in practice this week, and they'll be ready for the moment here against Jacksonville. We did see some really good things in that Lions game at times. I loved how Rashee Rice used space on his touchdown grab. That was really impressive and exciting for a young player to do that in his first ever game. I'll see some more of that here moving forward. Hopefully a big bounce back game for the receiver core here against the Jags.
The guys that have been around now for a year, with Marquez Valdes-Scantling had the big catch of 36 yards in the game against the Lions. But you look at Sky Moore, maybe a lot of targets here delivering, and then Justin Watson as well. So those guys have been with Patrick for a year. That should help them in this game. But week 2, we've seen already tons of drama in the National Football League, but this feels like an urgent week 2 for the Kansas City Chiefs as they take on the Jags.